The gun wasn't pointed at him, it was pointed at her. Vincent stood in the rain outside Alara's apartment, watching 3 shadows move toward her window. 20 years ago, he'd promised her he'd come back when he was rich. Now, he owned half the city and had just killed to keep her alive. She didn't know that yet. The blood on the envelope in his hands wasn't his. It belonged to the last man who tried this. Vincent climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. When she opened the door and saw him soaking wet, neither of them breathed for 3 seconds. He expected her to scream, to slam the door, to call the police. Instead, she whispered 5 words that destroyed him. "I knew you'd come back." Not surprised, not afraid. Like she'd been waiting, like she'd been counting on it. Here's what made his blood run cold. She'd known who he'd become for 3 years. Known he was the ghost, known about the empire, the violence, the bodies, and she'd never reached out. Never stopped him. The girl who once believed in fairy tales had learned to play a different game. The envelope in his hands contained proof that the threat to her life wasn't random. It was because of him. His enemies had found his one weakness. Now she had a choice. Let him protect her and become complicit in his darkness, or send him away and risk everything she'd built. Either way, the boy she'd loved was dead. The question was whether the monster he'd become could save her, or if trying would destroy them both. One thing was certain, the 3 men in that car across the street weren't leaving until someone died tonight. Before we go deeper, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? We love hearing from you across the globe. This story gets darker before it gets lighter. The choices made in the next few hours will determine whether love can survive when death is literally waiting outside the door. Now let me take you back to where it all started, to a neighborhood where promises were the only currency worth keeping, and breaking them could cost you everything. Brooklyn, 1985. Streetlights flickered more than they stayed on. Corner stores had bars on the windows. Kids learned early that life didn't hand out second chances. This is where 12-year-old Vincent Torino learned what hunger really meant, not just in his stomach, but in his bones, in his dreams, in every waking moment that reminded him he was invisible to a world that didn't care if he lived or died. Vincent's father left when he was 6. His mother worked 3 jobs and still couldn't keep the lights on half the time. Most nights, Vincent ate cereal with water because milk was a luxury. He wore the same torn jacket through 2 winters, the kind that let the cold seep through every thread. Teachers stopped calling on him in class. Other kids avoided him, not out of cruelty, but because poverty has a way of making people uncomfortable, like looking at it too long might be contagious. But there was one person who never looked away. Her name was Alara Montes, and she lived in the building across from his. She wasn't rich either. Her family ran a small bodega that barely broke even, but compared to Vincent's world, she had everything. Dinner every night, clean clothes, a mother who smiled, and a father who came home. And somehow, despite all of that, she noticed him. It started on a Tuesday, in October. Vincent was sitting on the stoop, staring at nothing, stomach growling so loud he thought the whole block could hear it. Alara walked past, carrying groceries for her parents' store. She stopped, tilted her head, and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "You hungry?" she asked. Simple as that. No pity in her voice, no judgment, just a question that treated him like a person instead of a problem. Vincent wanted to say no. Pride told him to refuse. But his stomach made the decision for him, and he took the sandwich with shaking hands. Turkey and cheese. He still remembers the taste, the way the bread was soft, the way the mustard had just the right tang. He ate it in 4 bites, and when he looked up, she was smiling, not at him, with him. "I'm Alara," she said. "I see you around. You should come by the store sometime. My dad always makes too much food." That's how it began. A sandwich, a smile, a girl who saw him when the rest of the world pretended he didn't exist. Over the next 3 years, Alara became his lifeline. She'd sneak him leftover sandwiches from the bodega. She'd sit with him on the stoop and talk about everything and nothing, movies she'd seen, books she'd read, dreams she had about traveling someday. Vincent never talked much, but he listened. And in listening, he fell in love with the way she saw the world, like it was full of possibilities instead of dead ends. By the time they were 15, something had shifted between them. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was the way his chest tightened when she laughed. It was the way her hand would brush against his when they walked, and neither of them would pull away. It was the way she looked at him, not at his torn clothes or his empty pockets, but at him. Vincent Torino, the invisible boy, suddenly felt like he mattered. One summer night, they sat on the rooftop of her building, legs dangling over the edge, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Ilara leaned her head on his shoulder. "You ever think about getting out of here?" she asked. Vincent stared at the skyline. "Every day. But where would I even go? People like me don't get out." She lifted her head and looked at him with those dark, serious eyes. "You're not people like you, Vincent. You're smart. You're strong. You just need a chance." He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to believe her so badly it hurt. But chances didn't come to kids from neighborhoods like theirs. Still, sitting there with her, feeling her warmth against him, Vincent allowed himself to dream. "If I ever make it," he said slowly, "if I ever get rich, if I ever become somebody, I'll come back for you." He turned to face her, his voice cracking. "I'll marry you, Ilara. I swear it. When I'm rich, when I'm somebody, I'll come back and marry you." Ilara smiled, but there was something sad in it, something that suggested she knew how hard the world could be on dreamers. "You don't have to be rich, Vincent," she whispered. "You just have to be you." But he shook his head. "No, you deserve better than this, better than me right now. I'm going to make something of myself, for you." She kissed him then, soft, gentle, a kiss that tasted like hope and heartbreak all at once. And in that moment, Vincent Torino made a promise he had no idea how to keep. He just knew he had to, because losing Ilara wasn't an option. She was the only good thing in his life, the only reason he hadn't given up completely. But here's the thing about promises made by desperate boys. They don't account for what desperation turns you into when you're willing to do anything to keep them. Vincent didn't know it yet, but that promise would cost him everything. And the boy Ilara kissed on that rooftop, he wouldn't survive what came next. Ever made a promise you weren't sure you could keep? Drop a comment below, because what Vincent did to honor his word would change him in ways no 15-year-old could ever predict. The cost wasn't just his innocence, it was his soul. And 20 years later, that debt would come due in the worst possible way, with Ilara's life hanging in the balance. 3 months after that rooftop promise, Vincent's mother died. Heart attack. She collapsed at her second job, a diner where she worked the graveyard shift. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. Vincent came home to find social services waiting in his apartment. They told him he'd be placed in foster care. He was 16. He had no family, no options. The system would swallow him whole, and everyone knew what happened to kids who disappeared into that system. They came out broken, if they came out at all. Vincent ran. He packed a single bag, left everything he knew, and disappeared into the streets. He told himself he'd come back for Ilara once he figured things out. He left her a note, slipped under her door at 3 a.m., too ashamed to say goodbye to her face. "I have to go. I'll come back when I'm somebody, I promise. Wait for me." He didn't sign it. He didn't have to. She'd know. What Vincent didn't understand was how fast the streets could change you, how hunger and fear and rage could twist a person into something unrecognizable. He started small, running errands for guys in the neighborhood who needed things moved, delivered, forgotten. He didn't ask questions. Questions got you killed. He just did what he was told and took the cash. It was enough to eat, enough to sleep in cheap motels instead of alleys, enough to survive. But survival wasn't the same as living. Vincent was hollow. Every day without Alara felt like another piece of him dying. He thought about her constantly, wondered if she'd gotten his note, if she hated him for leaving, if she'd moved on. The not knowing ate at him worse than the hunger ever had. And that hollowness made him dangerous. Because a man with nothing to lose will do things others won't. By 18, Vincent had caught the attention of Marco Salvi, a mid-level enforcer for the Gallo crime family. Marco saw something in Vincent that others missed. Cold calculation beneath desperation. Vincent didn't flinch when things got violent. He didn't ask moral questions. He just executed orders with a precision that impressed the old-timers. Marco took him under his wing, taught him how the real world worked, the world beneath the world, where power was the only currency and loyalty was bought with blood. Vincent learned fast. He learned how to read people, how to spot weakness, how to turn fear into control. He learned that respect wasn't given, it was taken. And most importantly, he learned that the boy from Brooklyn who made promises on rooftops, that boy was a liability. So Vincent buried him. He stopped thinking about right and wrong, stopped thinking about the life he could have had, stopped thinking about anything except the promise he'd made to Alara. Get rich, become somebody, go back for her. But here's what Vincent didn't count on. The higher you climb in that world, the more enemies you make. And enemies don't just target you, they target everything you've ever cared about. 5 years passed. Vincent rose through the ranks faster than anyone expected. He wasn't just muscle, he was strategic. He saw angles others missed, anticipated moves before they happened. By 23, he'd earned his own crew. By 25, he'd taken out 3 rival operations and absorbed their territories. People started calling him something other than Vincent. They called him the Ghost, because you never saw him coming until it was too late. He made money, a lot of it, more than he'd ever dreamed possible growing up in that crumbling apartment. He bought properties, laundered cash through legitimate businesses, built an empire that stretched across 3 boroughs. He wore custom suits. He drove cars that cost more than most people's houses. He had power. He had respect. He had everything except the one thing that mattered: Alara. But Vincent made a critical mistake. In his world, showing weakness gets you killed. So he never talked about her, never mentioned her name, never let anyone know that the Ghost, the man who felt nothing, who crushed enemies without hesitation, had a heart that still belonged to a girl from Brooklyn. He thought silence would protect her. He thought if no one knew about her, she'd be safe. He was wrong. Because in Vincent's world, people make it their business to find what you're hiding. And 3 years ago, someone found out about Alara. Vincent never knew who leaked it. Maybe someone from the old neighborhood who remembered them together. Maybe someone who followed him during one of his late-night drives past her building. But the information got out. And once it was out, it spread through the underworld like wildfire. The Ghost has a weakness, a woman, a civilian. For 3 years, Vincent had been fighting a shadow war he didn't even know about. Rivals had been watching Alara, waiting for the right moment to strike. They wanted leverage. They wanted to hurt him in a way that bullets and bombs never could. They wanted to take away the only thing that made the Ghost human. Vincent only found out 48 hours ago. One of his informants, a kid who worked in a rival crew, came to him with information. The Castellano family was making a move. They'd ordered a hit on Alara. Not to kill her outright, that would be too merciful. They wanted to abduct her, torture her, send Vincent pieces of her until he gave up his territories, until he surrendered everything he'd built. Until the Ghost became just Vincent Torino, again powerless and broken. Vincent didn't hesitate. He activated every resource he had, called in every favor, mobilized his entire network. He tracked down the hit squad 3 men, professionals, well paid. He found them in a warehouse in Queens, going over their plan. Photos of Alara spread across a table. Her address, her schedule, her routines. They knew everything. When she left for work, when she came home, where she was most vulnerable. Vincent killed 2 of them before they even realized he was there. The third one, the leader he kept alive long enough to get answers. Who ordered the hit? Who else knew? Were there backup plans? The man talked. They always talked when Vincent asked the right way. And when Vincent was done, when he had every piece of information he needed, he ended it. Quick, clean, no mercy for men who planned to hurt her. But here's what destroyed Vincent. The interrogation revealed something worse than the hit itself. The Castellano family had been watching Alara for months. They had her entire life documented, her nonprofit, her routines, the kids she helped. And they discovered something Vincent never knew Alara had figured out who he was 3 years ago. One of her kids had mentioned the ghost, had described the man who ran the West Side, and Alara, smart as she was, had put it together. She knew. For 3 years, she'd known Vincent Torino and the ghost were the same person, and she'd never reached out, never tried to stop him, never warned him that his past had caught up to his present. The woman who once believed in fairy tales had learned to play a different game. She'd been protecting herself, building her own empire of goodness, while knowing that the boy she'd loved had become a monster. That knowledge that she'd known and stayed silent hit Vincent harder than any bullet ever could. Why hadn't she reached out? Was she afraid? Did she hate him? Or worse, did she understand that the boy she'd kissed on that rooftop was truly dead, and the ghost was all that remained? Vincent disposed of the bodies, cleaned the scene, took the envelope full of evidence, photos, schedules, communications, and added his own note. They wanted to hurt you because of me. I stopped them. But there are more. There will always be more as long as I'm alive. He stared at his bloodied hands, at the envelope, at the proof that loving him was a death sentence for anyone who still believed in goodness. Meanwhile, Alara's life had taken its own dark turn. After Vincent disappeared, she waited. For months, she checked every street corner, every alley, hoping he'd walk around the corner with that shy smile and some explanation that made sense. But he never came. Her parents told her to move on. Her friends told her he wasn't worth it. But Alara couldn't let go of the memory of the boy who'd looked at her like she was the only light in his darkness. Eventually, grief turned into fuel. If Vincent could disappear and remake himself, so could she. Alara threw herself into school, graduated top of her class, got a scholarship to NYU. She studied social work because she'd seen too many kids like Vincent slip through the cracks. She wanted to be the person who caught them before they fell. By her mid-20s, she was running a nonprofit that provided resources to at-risk youth meals, mentorship, legal aid, housing assistance, everything Vincent never had. She built her own empire, not one of violence and fear, but one of hope and second chances. People in the neighborhood knew her name the same way they knew Vincent's, but for opposite reasons. Alara Montez was the woman who saved kids. The ghost was the man who destroyed them. But Alara wasn't naive. She paid attention. She listened when her kids talked about the streets, about the crews, about the power players who controlled their neighborhoods. And 3 years ago, when a 15-year-old boy mentioned the ghost described a man who used to live in their neighborhood, who disappeared and come back as something else entirely, Alara's blood ran cold. She did her research, quietly, carefully. She found the connections, saw the pattern. The ghost territory matched Vincent's old neighborhood. The timeline matched when Vincent disappeared. And when she dug deeper into the rumors, into the whispers about how the ghost operated strategic, calculated, ruthless, but never random, she recognized the intelligence. The same intelligence Vincent had shown even as a hungry kid trying to survive. She knew. And knowing destroyed her. Because what do you do when the boy you loved becomes the man you should fear? What do you do when his promise to become somebody meant becoming somebody terrible? She couldn't reach out, couldn't confront him. Because deep down, she understood something most people didn't. Vincent had become the ghost for her, to keep that promise. To become rich enough, powerful enough, important enough to come back and marry her like he'd sworn he would. His love had turned him into a monster, and her love had kept her silent. For 3 years, Ilara built her nonprofit and waited. She didn't know what she was waiting for him to reach out, for him to die in some gang war, for the universe to make the decision she couldn't. She saved kids who reminded her of him, poured all her grief and love into giving them the chances Vincent never had. It was penance. It was hope. It was the only way she knew how to honor what they'd once been to each other. But she also prepared. Because Ilara wasn't stupid. She knew that being connected to the ghost, even as a memory, even as a childhood friend, made her a target. She installed security systems, varied her routines, took self-defense classes. She couldn't confront Vincent, but she could protect herself from the consequences of his choices. 20 years after that rooftop kiss, Vincent Torino sat in his car outside Ilara's building, rain hammering the windshield, blood drying on the envelope in his hands. He'd finally done it. He was rich. He was powerful. He was somebody. But the cost had been everything. And now his enemies had found his weakness. The hit squad he'd eliminated was just the first wave. According to the information he'd tortured out of their leader, the Castellano family had backup plans. More teams, more threats. They wouldn't stop until either Vincent surrendered his empire or Ilara was dead. He had 2 choices: walk away and let Ilara live her life, hoping his enemies would leave her alone once he disappeared. Or go to her, tell her everything, and ask her to let him protect her, which meant dragging her into his darkness, making her complicit in the violence, destroying the goodness she'd built. Neither option was acceptable. Both would destroy her in different ways. But Vincent couldn't walk away. Not when 3 men were sitting in a black sedan across the street from her building right now, waiting for their moment. Not when the woman he'd loved for 20 years was in danger because of him. So Vincent grabbed the envelope, stepped out into the rain, and made his choice. He was going to her. He was going to tell her everything. And then he was going to kill every single person who'd ever thought about hurting her. Because the ghost didn't negotiate, didn't compromise, didn't show mercy. And if Ilara hated him for it, if she looked at him with fear instead of love, then at least she'd be alive to hate him. That was a price Vincent was willing to pay. He climbed the stairs to her apartment, each step heavier than the last. 3rd floor, apartment 3C. He could see the shadows through her window. She was home, safe. For now. Vincent raised his hand to knock, then paused. This was it. The moment 20 years had been building toward. After this, there was no going back. No redemption. No second chances. He knocked 3 times. Want to know what happened when that door opened? Subscribe now, because what happens in the next hour will determine whether love can survive when death is literally waiting outside. The locks clicked. 1, 2, 3. The door opened, and there she was. Ilara Montes, 20 years older but somehow more beautiful than his memories had allowed. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with a few strands of silver. Her face had matured sharper cheekbones, fine lines around her eyes from smiling. But those eyes, those dark, serious eyes that had once looked at him like he mattered, they were the same. For 3 seconds, neither of them breathed. Vincent stood there, soaking wet, blood-stained envelope in his hands, death waiting across the street, and all he could think was, she's real. After 20 years of memories and regrets, Ilara Montes was real and alive and standing right in front of him. He expected her to scream, to slam the door in his face, to call the police, to do anything except what she actually did. Ilara looked at him, really looked at him, taking in the expensive suit, the scar on his jaw, the hardness in his eyes, and whispered 5 words that destroyed him. I knew you'd come back. Not surprised, not afraid, not angry, just knowing. Like she'd been expecting this moment, like she'd been counting on it. Vincent's carefully prepared speech evaporated. Ilara, You should come inside, she said quietly, stepping aside. Before they see you. His blood turned to ice. Before who sees me? Ilara's eyes flicked to the window, then back to him. The men in the car across the street. They've been there for 2 hours. I assume they were yours until you showed up. Her voice was steady, but Vincent saw the tremor in her hands as she closed the door behind him. Are they yours, Vincent? Or are they here for me? He stared at her, mind racing. She knew about the car. She'd been aware of the surveillance. How long have you known? He asked roughly. About me. About what I became. Ilara crossed her arms, and Vincent saw it, the defense mechanism, the armor she'd built over 20 years. 3 years, she said. Give or take. One of my kids mentioned the ghost. Described you perfectly, actually. Same eyes, same way of thinking, 3 steps ahead. Took me about 6 months to confirm it, but she shrugged. I knew. And you never reached out. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Neither did you. Ilara shot back. Her eyes flashed with something Vincent couldn't quite identify. Anger? Pain? Both? You disappeared for 20 years, Vincent. 20 years. You promised you'd come back when you were rich. Well, congratulations. You're rich. You're powerful. You're the ghost. She spat the name like it tasted bitter. But you're also 20 years too late. Vincent felt something crack in his chest. I came back for you. Everything I did, everything I became it, was all to keep that promise. By becoming a criminal? Ilara's voice rose. By running a crime empire? By hurting people? Killing people, that was all for me? Tears streamed down her face now, but her voice stayed strong. Don't you dare put that on me, Vincent Torino. Don't you dare make me responsible for your choices. I'm not. Vincent stopped, jaw clenched. She was right. Of course she was right. He'd told himself the story so many times that he was doing it for her, for them, for the promise that he'd started believing it. But the truth was simpler and more selfish. He'd done it because he was angry and hungry and broken, and violence had given him power when nothing else would. Then why are you here? Ilara asked, wiping her eyes. After 20 years, why show up now? Vincent held up the envelope. Blood had seeped through the corners, staining his fingers. Because they found out about you, my enemies. They know you're my weakness, and they're coming for you. Ilara's face went pale. The men in the car are from the Castellano family. They're watching you, waiting for their moment to move. Vincent's voice hardened. But they won't get it. I eliminated the first team they sent. 3 men who were planning to abduct you, hurt you, use you to get to me. I killed them, Ilara, 2 days ago, and I'd do it again. He threw the envelope on her coffee table. It landed with a wet thud. That's proof. Everything they had planned, photos, schedules, communications. They've been watching you for months. They know your routines, your non-profit, where you're vulnerable. And it's all because of me. Because I was stupid enough to think I could keep you separate from my world. Ilara stared at the envelope like it was a bomb. You killed them! I protected you. You made me a target. Her voice broke. Vincent, I built a life here. A good life. I help people. I save kids. And now you're telling me that everything I've worked for is in danger because of a promise you made when we were 15? Yes. Vincent met her eyes, unflinching. And I'm telling you that I won't let them hurt you. The men in that car, they're dead. They just don't know it yet. Anyone else who comes for you? Same fate. I'll burn the entire Castellano family to the ground before I let them touch you. Ilara backed away from him. Listen to yourself. You're talking about mass murder like it's a solution. Like violence is the answer to everything. In my world, it is. Vincent said coldly. You think I can negotiate with these people? Reason with them? They don't understand anything except strength and fear. And I'm very good at both. This isn't you, Ilara whispered. The boy I knew is dead. Vincent's shout echoed in the small apartment. He died 20 years ago in a gutter. starving and desperate and alone. I'm what's left. I'm the ghost. And the ghost protects what's his. Silence fell between them, heavy and suffocating. Ilara's hands shook as she processed his words. What's yours? She repeated slowly. I'm not yours, Vincent. I never was. A promise made by desperate children doesn't make me your property. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Ilara challenged. Because from where I'm standing, you showed up after 20 years, told me I'm in danger because of you, and now you're planning to commit more murders to protect me. Did you even ask what I wanted? Did it occur to you that maybe I don't want to be protected by the ghost? Vincent felt his world tilting. You'd rather die than let me help you? I'd rather live my own life, make my own choices, and deal with my own consequences, Ilara said firmly. Even if those consequences are dangerous. Even if, her voice caught, even if loving you 20 years ago is what put me in this position now. Those words, loving you 20 years ago, hit Vincent like a physical blow. Past tense. She'd loved him. Once. Not anymore. I came here to give you a choice, Vincent said quietly, pulling himself together. Let me protect you and accept what I've become. Let me station my men around your building, your nonprofit. Let me make sure the Castellano family knows that touching you means war. Or, he paused, I disappear. Leave the city. Dissolve my operations. Remove myself from your life completely. Maybe they'll leave you alone if I'm gone. Or maybe they'll kill me anyway, just to send a message, Ilara said bitterly. She walked to the window, stared out at the black sedan. You've backed us both into a corner, Vincent. There's no good choice here. Either I become complicit in your violence, or I risk dying because of a connection I never asked to be weaponized. Vincent joined her at the window. There's a third option. She turned to look at him. What? We end this tonight, Vincent said. His voice was calm, controlled, but underneath it was something dark and final. I go down there right now and eliminate the threat, permanently. You stay here, safe, and when I'm done, we talk. Really talk. About everything, what I became, what you became, whether there's anything left between us worth saving. Ilara searched his face. And if there's nothing left? If I can't accept what you've done, who you are now? Then I disappear, Vincent said simply. I'll make sure you're protected anonymously, from a distance, but I'll walk out of your life forever. You'll never see me again. You'd do that? Ilara's voice was barely a whisper. Just walk away? Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back. When she didn't, he touched her face gently, thumb brushing away a tear. I spent 20 years becoming someone worthy of you. But if being worthy means becoming someone you can't love, then what's the point? I'd rather lose you and know you're safe than keep trying to be something you can't accept. For a moment, they just stood there, two people who'd loved each other as children, separated by time and choices and an ocean of violence between who they'd been and who they'd become. Then, Ilara made her decision. Do what you have to do, she said quietly. But Vincent, don't expect me to thank you for it, and don't expect me to pretend the blood on your hands doesn't matter. Vincent nodded. I wouldn't expect anything less. He turned toward the door, every muscle in his body shifting into combat mode. The ghost was taking over, cold, calculated, lethal. But before he could leave, Ilara grabbed his arm. Wait. She pulled him back, rose on her toes, and kissed him. It was nothing like the kiss they'd shared on the rooftop 20 years ago. That one had been soft and hopeful and full of dreams. This one was desperate and angry and tasted like goodbye. When she pulled away, her eyes were red but determined. Now we're even. You left me without saying goodbye. I just did the same. Vincent stared at her, something breaking and reforming in his chest. This isn't goodbye, isn't it? Ilara stepped back. Go handle your business, Vincent. If you survive, if we both survive, then maybe we can figure out what comes next. But right now, you're the ghost, and I don't know if I can love a ghost. Vincent left without another word. Each step down those stairs felt like descending into hell, but this was hell he understood. Hell he was good at. The rain had intensified, turning the street into a blur of neon and shadow. The black sedan sat across from the building, engine running, 3 shapes visible inside. Vincent approached from behind, using the parked cars for cover. His hand found the gun, holstered beneath his jacket, a familiar weight, a familiar comfort. 20 years of violence had made him very good at this. Too good. He was 10 feet from the sedan when his phone vibrated. A text from Dante. "Boss, 3 more cars incoming. Castellano sent reinforcements. You got maybe 5 minutes." Vincent's jaw tightened. 5 minutes. 3 men in the car ahead of him, plus 9 more on the way. 12 total. Bad odds, even for the ghost. But Vincent had faced worse, and he'd never had more motivation than he did right now. Alara, 3 floors up, waiting to see if the monster could become human again. He raised his gun, aimed at the driver's window, and made his choice. Drop a comment if you're still with me, because this story is about to reach its breaking point. Nobody's walking away from this unchanged. Vincent's finger rested on the trigger. 1 pull and the driver's head would explode. 2 more shots and the other men would follow. Quick, clean, efficient. 20 years of violence had taught him that mercy was a luxury he couldn't afford. But something stopped him. Maybe it was Alara's words echoing in his head. "Don't expect me to thank you for it." Maybe it was the realization that killing these 3 men wouldn't solve anything. The Castellano family would just send more and more. An endless cycle of violence that would consume them both. Maybe, for the first time in 2 decades, Vincent Torino hesitated. That hesitation saved his life. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, lean, wearing an expensive coat. Not muscle, someone important. He looked directly at Vincent's position behind the car, showing no fear despite the gun pointed at his head. "Ghost," the man called out. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "You can shoot me. You'd be dead 10 seconds later. I've got snipers on 3 rooftops, but you'd get your shot. Or you can put the gun down and we can talk. Your choice." Vincent's mind raced. Snipers. He'd been so focused on the sedan, on protecting Alara, that he'd missed the bigger play. Amateur mistake. Lethal mistake. He scanned the roof lines, spotted movement on at least 2 buildings. The man wasn't bluffing. "You've got 30 seconds before my backup arrives," Vincent said, keeping his gun trained on the man. "Say what you came to say." The man smiled. "Anthony Castellano sends his regards. He wants you to know this isn't personal, it's business. You've taken too much territory, eliminated too many of his operations. He needs to make an example. And the girl up there?" He nodded toward Alara's window. "She's the perfect leverage." "She's not leverage," Vincent growled. "She's off limits." "Nothing's off limits in this business, Ghost. You taught us that." The man pulled out a cigarette, lit it casually. "But Anthony is a reasonable man. He's willing to make a deal." "I don't negotiate with." "You'll negotiate with this," the man interrupted. "Because the alternative is we kill everyone you've ever cared about, starting with Alara Montes and working our way through every kid in her nonprofit. We'll burn that building to the ground with them inside. And you'll watch. That's the alternative." Vincent's blood turned to ice. "You wouldn't." "We already would have. Except Anthony wants to give you an option first. 'Cause despite what you think, he respects you, respects what you've built. So here's the deal. You give up half your territory. You acknowledge Castellano family supremacy in Brooklyn. You pay tribute monthly. And in exchange, everyone you care about stays alive. Including her. And if I refuse?" The man took a long drag of his cigarette. "Then, tomorrow morning, Alara Montes doesn't wake up. Neither do the 17 kids currently sleeping in the nonprofit's emergency shelter. Neither does that sweet old woman who runs the bodega on 3rd Street, Maria Rodriguez, isn't it? Your dead girlfriend's mother?" He smiled. "We did our homework, Ghost. We know everyone who matters to you, and they're all targets." Vincent's hand tightened on the gun. He could kill this man, could probably take out one or two of the snipers before they got him. But then what? Alara would still be vulnerable. The targets would still exist. And Vincent would be dead, unable to protect any of them. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Vincent asked. "You don't," the man said honestly. "But you know what happens if you don't accept. Clock's ticking, ghost. What's it going to be, half an empire and everyone lives? Or all of it and everyone dies?" Vincent stood there in the rain, gun pointed at a man who held all the cards, and realized something that shattered him. He'd become so powerful that his power itself had become his greatest weakness. Every territory he'd taken, every rival he'd eliminated, every dollar he'd made it had all painted a target on the back of everyone he'd ever cared about. Alara had been right. The boy she'd loved was dead, but the monster he'd become might be what killed her. "I need to think about it," Vincent said finally. The man laughed. "You've got until midnight. That's—" He checked his watch. 43 minutes. After that, the deal's off the table and we start killing people. He flicked his cigarette into a puddle. "Oh, and Ghost? Don't even think about running. We've got eyes on every exit out of the city. You try to rabbit with the girl, you'll both be dead before you hit the Holland Tunnel." The man got back into the sedan. The engine revved and the car pulled away, leaving Vincent standing in the rain with a gun in his hand and an impossible choice in front of him. His phone buzzed. "Dante." "Boss, we've got a problem. Castellano's people just hit 3 of our warehouses. They're moving fast." "Stand down," Vincent ordered. "What?" I said, "Stand down. Don't retaliate. Don't engage. Just wait." "Boss, they're destroying our operations." "I know what they're doing." Vincent's shout echoed off the buildings. He forced himself to calm down. "Just give me an hour. I'll handle it." He hung up and looked up at Alara's window. She was standing there, silhouetted against the light, watching him. Even from 3 floors down, he could see the fear in her posture. She knew something bad had just happened. She knew the choice was coming. Vincent climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. When he reached her door, it was already open. Alara stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. "What did they want?" she asked quietly. Vincent stepped inside and told her everything. The threat, the deal, the timeline, the targets, including her, the kids in her nonprofit, everyone he'd ever cared about. When he finished, Alara was pale but composed. "So you have to choose," she said, "between your empire and their lives." "It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple," Alara interrupted. Her voice was steady, but Vincent saw her hands shaking. "You built something terrible, Vincent. Something that's now threatening everyone around you. The Castellano family didn't create this problem, you did. And now innocent people are going to die unless you fix it." "I can fight them," Vincent said desperately. "I can mobilize my crews, fortify positions, eliminate the threat." "How many people die in that fight?" Alara demanded. "How many of my kids get caught in the crossfire? How many buildings burn? How many families get destroyed?" Tears streamed down her face. "This is what I meant. You think violence solves everything, but all it does is create more violence, more death, more pain." Vincent felt something inside him cracking. "Then what do you want me to do? Give up everything I built? Everything I became? I did this for you." "No, you didn't!" Alara's shout echoed in the small apartment. "You did it for yourself, to prove you were worth something. To show the world that the poor kid from Brooklyn could become somebody. I was just the excuse you used to justify it." She wiped her eyes angrily. "You want to know what I wanted? I wanted you to come back as a teacher, or a social worker, or literally anything that didn't involve hurting people. I wanted you to honor that promise by becoming someone good, not someone powerful." "It's too late for that," Vincent said quietly. "Is it?" Alara stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, see the exact shade of brown in her eyes. Because from where I'm standing, you still have a choice. You can choose to be Vincent Torino again, the boy who made promises on rooftops, the boy who believed in something better. Or you can choose to stay the ghost and watch everyone around you die. If I give them what they want, I'm finished, Vincent said. Half my territory, monthly tribute, I'll be a puppet. Castellano will own me. And if you don't, I'm dead, Ilara said flatly, along with 17 kids who never asked to be part of your war. So yeah, Vincent, you're finished either way. The question is whether you finish as a man who saved innocent lives or as a monster who let them die to protect his pride. The words hit like bullets. Vincent stood there, every instinct screaming at him to fight, to refuse, to burn the Castellano family to the ground rather than surrender. But when he looked at Ilara, really looked at her, he saw something that broke him completely. She wasn't asking him to save her. She was asking him to save himself, to find whatever was left of the boy who'd kissed her on a rooftop and remember what it felt like to be human. To choose love over power, life over death, redemption over revenge. If I do this, Vincent said slowly, if I give them what they want, will you give me a chance? To prove I can be different? To prove the boy you loved isn't completely gone? Ilara was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she finally admitted. I honestly don't know if there's anything left between us, Vincent. 20 years is a long time. We're different people now. You've done things I can't forget. Killed people, hurt people, built an empire on suffering. But Vincent heard the hope in his own voice, desperate and pathetic. But, Ilara said softly, if you make the right choice tonight, if you choose those kids' lives over your pride, then maybe we can start over. Not as Vincent and Ilara from 20 years ago, as two people trying to figure out if love can survive the worst versions of themselves. Vincent checked his watch. 31 minutes until midnight. 31 minutes to decide between everything he'd built and everyone he'd ever loved. Between being the ghost or being Vincent Torino again. He pulled out his phone and made the call. Dante, I need you to set up a meeting with Anthony Castellano. Tonight, tell him the ghost accepts his terms. Dante was silent for a beat. Boss, you sure about this? No, Vincent admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. He hung up and looked at Ilara. It's done. I'm giving them what they want. The territory, the tribute, all of it. Ilara's expression was unreadable. And your empire? Cut in half. Neutered. I'll still have operations, but I'll be under Castellano's thumb, answering to him, paying him. Basically, everything I swore I'd never do. Vincent laughed bitterly. 20 years of building, gone in one phone call. Was it worth it? Ilara asked quietly. The empire, the power, the violence. Was any of it worth it? Vincent looked around her small apartment at the photos of kids she'd saved, at the books stacked everywhere, at the warmth and life and purpose radiating from every corner. Then he looked at his own hands, stained with blood that no amount of washing would ever fully remove. No, he admitted. It wasn't worth it. None of it was worth losing you. Ilara closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there were tears, but also something else. Something that looked almost like hope. Then maybe there's still a chance for us. Maybe not today. Maybe not for a long time. But if you meant what you said, if you're really choosing to be different, then maybe. Vincent's phone buzzed. A message from Dante. Meeting set. Castellano Warehouse. 1 hour. Come alone. He showed Ilara the message. I have to go. Finalize the deal. Sign away half my life's work to save the other half. Will you be safe? The concern in her voice nearly broke him. Probably not, Vincent said honestly. Castellano might decide it's easier to just kill me and take everything. But I don't have a choice. This is the play. Ilara walked to her desk, pulled something from a drawer. Vincent's note. The one he'd slipped under her door 20 years ago, yellowed and creased from being read too many times. She pressed it into his hand. I kept this, she said. For 20 years. I kept it because I believed in promises. You made the wrong promise back then, Vincent. You promised to come back when you were rich. But here's a new promise you can make. Promise you'll come back from this meeting alive. Don't promise me wealth or power or anything except that you'll walk back through that door tomorrow morning. Can you do that? Vincent looked at the note, at his teenage handwriting, at the proof that he'd once been capable of hope. I promise, he said. I'll come back. And when I do, maybe we can start figuring out what comes next. Alara nodded. Then go. Do what you have to do. And Vincent? She touched his face gently, the same way she had 20 years ago. The boy I loved was brave. Stupid and desperate and way too willing to make impossible promises. But brave. If he's still in there somewhere, tonight's his chance to prove it. Vincent left without looking back. If he'd looked back, he might not have been able to leave at all. And the clock was ticking. 47 minutes until midnight. 47 minutes to either save everyone he loved or watch them all die. The rain had turned into a storm, thunder rolling across the city like a warning. Vincent got into his car, checked his gun one last time, and drove toward the warehouse. Toward the meeting that would either end his empire or end his life. Maybe both. But for the first time in 20 years, Vincent Torino wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of living and losing the one person who'd ever made him feel human. And that fear, that raw, desperate fear, was what would determine whether the ghost could become Vincent again, whether monsters could be redeemed, whether promises made by broken boys could ever truly be kept. Stay with me, because what happens next will answer all those questions. And the answers? They're going to shock you. The warehouse was exactly what Vincent expected, abandoned, industrial, the kind of place where bodies disappeared and nobody asked questions. 3 black SUVs were parked outside, engines running. Armed men flanked the entrance, watching Vincent's car approach with cold, professional eyes. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and walking into what could easily be an execution. But Vincent had spent 20 years in this world. He knew how power worked, how respect was earned and maintained, how showing fear was deadlier than any bullet. So he parked his car, stepped out into the storm, and walked toward the warehouse like he owned it. The guards patted him down, took his gun, his phone, his knife. They were thorough, professional. When they were satisfied he was clean, they nodded toward the entrance. Vincent stepped inside. The warehouse was mostly empty except for a table in the center, lit by a single overhead light. Anthony Castellano sat at the table, 68 years old, silver hair, perfectly styled, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most cars. He looked like a banker or a lawyer, not a man who'd ordered dozens of murders. That was part of what made him dangerous. "Ghost," Anthony said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Sit. We have business to discuss." Vincent sat, keeping his expression neutral. Around the perimeter of the warehouse, he counted at least 15 armed men, all exits covered, all angles calculated. If this went wrong, he wouldn't make it 3 steps. "You accepted my terms," Anthony continued. "Half your territory, monthly tribute, acknowledgement of Castellano family supremacy. That's quite a concession for a man known for never backing down." "I'm protecting what matters," Vincent said flatly. "The girl," Anthony smiled. "Elora Montez. Interesting woman. Runs a nonprofit. Helps at-risk youth. The exact opposite of you, Ghost. Tell me, what does someone like her see in someone like you?" "She doesn't," Vincent said. "Not anymore. But that doesn't change the fact that I won't let you hurt her." Anthony leaned back in his chair. "You know what's fascinating? For 20 years, you've been a ghost. Untouchable. No family, no connections, no weaknesses. And then suddenly, we find out about this woman from your past, and everything changes. You kill 3 of my men. You're willing to give up half your empire. All for a childhood sweetheart who, by all accounts, wants nothing to do with who you've become." He pulled out a file, slid it across the table. We did our research, very thorough research, and we found something interesting. Vincent opened the file. His stomach dropped. Photos, dozens of them. Elara at her nonprofit. Elara at the grocery store. Elara meeting with city council members about funding. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the dates. The photos went back 5 years. You've been watching her for 5 years? Vincent's voice was ice. Not watching, Anthony corrected. Investigating. Trying to figure out why the ghost, who'd never shown weakness in 2 decades, was quietly protecting a social worker on the Lower East Side. We didn't understand the connection until about 6 months ago. That's when we found the old neighborhood connections. The bodega, the rooftop, the promise. He smiled. It's actually quite romantic. Poor boy promises to marry his sweetheart when he gets rich. Becomes a crime lord to keep that promise. Returns 20 years later only to find she's become everything he is. Good, pure, helpful. It's like a fairy tale. A really dark, twisted fairy tale. Get to the point, Vincent growled. The point is this, Anthony said, his smile fading. I don't want your territory. I don't want your tribute. I don't give a damn about half your empire. Vincent froze. What? I want you to understand something about power, Ghost. Real power isn't about territory or money. It's about control. It's about making your enemies dance on strings they don't even know exist. Anthony pulled out another folder. See, my son Carlo, he's been running operations in Queens. He's smart, ambitious, everything I could want in an heir, but he's also reckless. 3 months ago, he got into some trouble, the kind that could bring down our entire family. He opened the folder. Police reports, evidence logs, witness statements. Carlo killed a federal prosecutor, beat her to death in a rage, left DNA everywhere. The FBI has been building a case for 8 weeks. They're about to make an arrest that will destroy my family and trigger a war that nobody wins. Vincent stared at the documents, beginning to understand. Here's what I need from you, Ghost, Anthony said quietly. I need someone to take the fall. Someone powerful enough that the FBI will believe they caught the real killer. Someone whose organization can be dismantled in a way that makes the feds look like heroes. Someone who has a very public weakness that makes the confession believable. You want me to confess to your son's murder, Vincent said slowly. I want you to confess to 17 murders, Anthony corrected, sliding over another file. All of them committed by my people over the last 2 years. You take the fall, the FBI closes 17 cases, and you spend the rest of your life in prison. In exchange, I guarantee Elara Montes and everyone associated with her stays safe forever, protected by the Castellano family until the day they die. Vincent felt the world tilting. You're asking me to sacrifice everything, my freedom, my empire, my life for a woman who doesn't even love me anymore. I'm not asking, Anthony said coldly. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Because here's the alternative. In 22 minutes, a fire starts at Elara's nonprofit. Faulty wiring, according to the report. 17 kids and 3 staff members die in their sleep. Tragic accident. No one to blame. He checked his watch. In 45 minutes, Elara Montes gets hit by a drunk driver on her way home from investigating the fire. Another tragedy. No connection. In 3 hours, 6 more people you've protected over the years, people you probably don't even remember helping, they all die in various accidents across the city. And tomorrow morning, when you wake up and realize everyone you've ever cared about is dead, you'll understand what real powerlessness feels like. Vincent's hands clenched into fists. I could kill you right now. You'd be dead before you stood up, Anthony said mildly. And then everything I just described happens anyway. No, Ghost. You're going to do exactly what I tell you. You're going to confess to those 17 murders. You're going to give a detailed account that matches our evidence. You're going to plead guilty and accept life in prison without parole. And, in exchange, Elara gets to keep helping kids, gets to keep believing in goodness, gets to live the life you spent 20 years trying to be worthy of. He slid a confession across the table, already typed up, ready to sign. The FBI raid happens in 6 hours. You'll be arrested at your penthouse. The evidence will be discovered during the search. It's all very neat, very clean. You become the monster everyone always suspected you were, and my son gets to live his life. Vincent stared at the confession, at the signature line waiting for his name. 20 years of building, destroying, killing all of it, ending with a piece of paper that would lock him away forever. "And if I refuse?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Then everyone dies," Anthony said simply. "Starting with her. I'll make you watch Ghost. I'll make you listen to her screams. And then, when you're completely broken, when you've lost everything, I'll let you live, because death would be too merciful." Vincent thought about Alara, about her apartment full of warmth and purpose, about the kids she'd saved, about the version of himself she'd challenged him to find, about the promise he'd made less than an hour ago to come back alive, to choose differently, to prove the boy she'd loved wasn't completely dead. Here's what you need to understand. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is surrender. Sometimes love means sacrificing everything, including yourself. Vincent Torino had spent 20 years becoming powerful enough to protect Alara. Now he had to become powerless enough to save her. He picked up the pen. "Where do I sign?" Comment below, would you have made the same choice? Because what Vincent just did will change everything. Vincent signed the confession at 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes before midnight, 13 minutes before Anthony Castellano's deadline. His hand was steady as he wrote his name, Vincent Torino, not the ghost claiming responsibility for 17 murders he didn't commit. Each stroke of the pen felt like signing away a piece of his soul. But maybe that soul was already gone. Maybe this was just making it official. "Smart choice," Anthony said, taking the confession and tucking it into his jacket. "The FBI will be at your penthouse at 6 a.m. I suggest you use the next few hours to get your affairs in order. Say your goodbyes. Make peace with whatever God you believe in." "I want guarantees," Vincent said quietly. "Legal guarantees that Alara and everyone connected to her stays protected." Anthony smiled. "You're in no position to negotiate, but as a gesture of good faith." He pulled out a document. "This is a trust. Anonymous. $50 million. It's earmarked for Alara's nonprofit, distributed over 20 years. Enough to expand her operations tenfold. She'll never know where it came from. But she'll be able to help thousands of kids instead of hundreds." He slid it across the table. "Sign this too. It transfers the funds from your accounts to the trust. Consider it your legacy, the ghost finally doing something good with all that blood money." Vincent read the document. It was legitimate, legal, ironclad. $50 million of his fortune money he'd made through violence and fear converted into sandwiches and hope for kids who reminded him of himself. He signed it. "One more thing," Vincent said. "I need to see her. One last time. Before the arrest." Anthony checked his watch. "You have until 5 a.m. After that, my people disappear, and you're on your own. Don't try to run. Don't try to warn her about any of this. Just say goodbye like a normal person who's about to go away for a long time." "How will I know you'll keep your word?" Vincent asked. "How do I know you won't kill her anyway once I'm locked up?" "You don't," Anthony said honestly. "But consider this. What good does it do me to kill her? You've already given me what I want, a confession that saves my son and destroys your organization. Alara Montez is only valuable as leverage. Once you're in prison for life, she's worthless to me. Easier to just let her live and avoid unnecessary attention." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even a guarantee. But it was all Vincent had. He stood up, his legs unsteady. 20 years of building an empire, and it had all come down to this, trusting the word of a man who'd threatened to murder everyone he loved. "One more question," Vincent said. "Why the elaborate setup? Why not just kill me and take everything?" Anthony's expression hardened. "Because killing you makes you a martyr. makes your organization rally around your memory and come after my family. But having you confess to being a serial killer? That destroys your legend. The ghost becomes just another violent criminal. Your people scatter. Your empire collapses. And my family consolidates power without firing a single shot. He stood up and extended his hand. Vincent stared at it for a moment, then shook it. The handshake of two men who understood that in their world, there were no good choices, only slightly less terrible ones. Vincent left the warehouse at 12:03 a.m. He had 4 hours and 57 minutes of freedom left. 4 hours to say goodbye to the only person who'd ever made him feel human. He drove through the rain-soaked streets, every minute feeling like both an eternity and no time at all. When he reached Ilara's building, he sat in his car for 10 minutes, trying to figure out what to say. How do you tell someone you love them and goodbye in the same breath? How do you explain that you're about to confess to 17 murders to save her life? How do you make 4 hours count for 20 years of mistakes? He didn't have answers, so he just went up. Ilara opened the door before he could knock. She'd been waiting. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was composed. "You're alive," she said quietly. "You kept your promise." "Can I come in?" Vincent asked. She stepped aside. Vincent entered her apartment for the last time, memorizing every detail, the books, the photos, the warmth, evidence that goodness could exist in the same world as him. Proof that not everyone became a monster. "It's done," he said. "The deal is made. Everyone's safe. Your kids, your nonprofit, everyone I've ever protected. They're all safe." Ilara studied his face. But I'm not," Vincent admitted. "The FBI is coming for me in a few hours. I'm going to prison, Ilara, for the rest of my life. And I can't tell you why, and I can't fight it, and I can't do anything except accept it." He saw the exact moment she understood. Her face went pale. "What did you do?" "I kept a different promise," Vincent said. "Not the one I made when I was 15. A better one. I chose you over my empire. I chose those kids over my freedom. I chose to be the person you challenged me to be, even if it's too late for us." Ilara's hands shook. "Vincent, what are you talking about? What did you confess to?" "It doesn't matter," he said quietly. "What matters is that you're safe, that your work continues, that the kids you help get their second chances. That's the only thing that matters anymore." "You're scaring me," Ilara whispered. "You're talking like you're never coming back." "I'm not," Vincent said. The words felt like glass in his throat. "I'm going away forever. But before I go, I need you to understand something. Everything I did, every terrible thing I became, I told myself it was for you, to keep that promise, to be worthy of you. But I was lying to myself." He stepped closer, close enough to see the tears streaming down her face. "The truth is, I did it because I was angry and hurt and broken, because violence made me feel powerful when everything else made me feel worthless. You were just the excuse I used, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I made you carry the weight of my choices." Ilara reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the scar on his jaw. "The boy I loved," she said softly, "he wouldn't sacrifice himself for people he barely knows. He wouldn't give up everything to keep a stranger's kids safe. So maybe he's not as dead as you think." Vincent caught her hand, held it against his cheek. "I have 4 hours left. 4 hours before they come for me. Can we just pretend? Just for 4 hours? That we're 15 again, sitting on that rooftop, and none of the bad stuff has happened yet?" Ilara nodded, tears falling freely now. "Yeah, we can pretend." They sat on her couch, not talking much, just existing in the same space. Vincent told her about the trust, $50 million for her nonprofit, anonymous, untraceable. She cried harder when she heard that. Told him he was an idiot for giving away his fortune. Told him it was the first truly good thing he'd done in 20 years. At 4:30 a.m., Vincent stood to leave. Ilara grabbed his hand. "Wait, I need to tell you something." "Ilara." "No, you need to hear this," she insisted. When you left 20 years ago, I was devastated. But I also understood why you did it. You were a kid with no options, trying to survive. And when I found out you'd become the ghost, I was horrified. But I also understood that too. Because I work with kids like you were every single day. I see what poverty and desperation do to people. I see how easily good kids become broken adults. She pulled him closer. So, here's what I want you to know. I don't forgive you for the violence. I don't forgive you for the people you hurt. But I understand why it happened. And the man standing in front of me right now, the one who's about to sacrifice everything to save people he doesn't owe anything to, that man is someone I could love. That man is someone worth believing in. Vincent felt something break open in his chest. I'm going to prison for the rest of my life. I know, Alara said, but prisons allow visitors, and I'm very good at keeping promises. So here's mine. I'll visit. Once a month, every month, until one of us dies. Not because you deserve it, not because I owe you, but because everyone deserves to be seen, to be remembered, to know they matter to someone. She kissed him then, soft, gentle, a kiss that tasted like goodbye and hello all at once. When she pulled away, she whispered, "Thank you for choosing us, for choosing those kids, for finally keeping the right promise." Vincent left at 4:47 a.m. He didn't look back. If he'd looked back, he wouldn't have been able to leave at all. He went to his penthouse, showered, put on a clean suit. At 5:58 a.m., he heard the commotion outside, FBI agents assembling, preparing for the raid. He could have run, could have fought, could have done any number of things the ghost would have done. Instead, Vincent Torino opened his door at exactly 6 a.m. and said, "I've been expecting you." The arrest was efficient, professional. They read him his rights, cuffed him, let him out of the building while news cameras flashed. Vincent kept his expression neutral, but inside he was thinking about Alara, about the promise she'd made, about visiting once a month, about being seen. At the federal holding facility, they processed him, took his fingerprints, his photo, his statement. Vincent confessed to everything, all 17 murders, with details that matched the evidence perfectly. The FBI agents couldn't believe their luck. They just cracked 17 cold cases with one confession. The ghost, the legendary crime lord, was going away forever. What they didn't know was that Vincent Torino had finally learned what real power was. Not control, not fear, not an empire built on violence. Real power was choosing to sacrifice everything for people who'd never know what you did for them. Real power was becoming powerless for the right reasons. 3 months later, Vincent sat in a maximum security prison, wearing orange, surrounded by men who knew exactly who he was. The ghost, the legend. And they all wanted a piece of him. But Vincent didn't fight back, didn't assert dominance, didn't do any of the things he would have done before. He just waited for the first Thursday of the month, because that's when Alara visited. She came through the glass partition, sat down, picked up the phone. "Hey," she said. Simple. No pity, no judgment, just acknowledgement that he existed. "Hey," Vincent replied. "I brought pictures," Alara said, holding up photos of kids at her nonprofit. "We expanded into 3 new locations with the trust fund. Helped 200 kids last month. 200 kids who won't become what you became. Thought you'd want to know." Vincent stared at the photos, at faces that reminded him of himself, at 15, hungry and desperate and full of potential. "Thank you for telling me. Thank you for making it possible," Alara said quietly. Then she smiled. "Want to hear about the chaos? Because running a nonprofit is 90% chaos." For the next hour, they talked. About her work, about the kids, about everything except the fact that Vincent was in prison for crimes he didn't commit. And for that hour, Vincent felt human again. Felt like maybe the boy from the rooftop wasn't completely dead, just locked up, waiting to be visited. When the hour was up, Alara stood to leave. "Same time next month?" "I'll be here," Vincent said. She paused at the door. Vincent? The promise you kept choosing those kids over your empire, that's the man I fell in love with all those years ago. He was always in there. Just took him 20 years and a prison sentence to figure out how to come back. Then she was gone. And Vincent sat in his cell, a convicted murderer serving life without parole, and felt something he hadn't felt in 2 decades. Peace. Not happiness, not redemption, just peace. The peace that comes from knowing you finally made the right choice, even if it destroyed you. 20 years ago, a poor boy promised to marry his sweetheart when he got rich. He kept that promise in the worst possible way by becoming a monster. But in the end, he kept a better promise. He chose love over power, life over death, sacrifice over survival. And maybe that's what redemption really is. Not erasing what you've done, not being forgiven, just making one right choice when all the wrong ones would be easier. Just being willing to give up everything for people who'll never know your name. The ghost died the day Vincent Torino went to prison. But the boy from Brooklyn, the one who believed in promises and second chances, he's still alive, still visiting once a month, still being seen by the only person who ever really mattered. And sometimes, in the darkness of a maximum security cell, that's enough. 5 years into his sentence, Vincent Torino had become someone nobody expected, a mentor. It started small. A young inmate, barely 20, facing 25 years for a murder committed during a robbery. The kid reminded Vincent of himself angry, scared, hiding fear behind aggression. Vincent started talking to him. Not preaching, not lecturing, just talking, sharing his own story. How violence seemed like power until it became a prison. Word spread. Other inmates started approaching Vincent, not for protection or connections or any of the things the ghost used to provide. They came for something harder to find in prison: honesty. Vincent didn't sugarcoat his story, didn't pretend he was redeemed or reformed. He just told the truth. He'd spent 20 years building an empire and lost everything that mattered. And if these kids were smart, they'd learn from his mistakes instead of repeating them. The prison administrators noticed. They asked Vincent to start leading a weekly group, informal, voluntary, just inmates talking about choices and consequences. Vincent agreed. Not because it would reduce his sentence, it wouldn't. He was never getting out, but because it gave him purpose, a reason to wake up beyond counting days until Alara's next visit. Speaking of Alara, she kept her promise. Once a month, every month, for 5 years. She brought photos, updates on the nonprofit, stories about kids she'd saved. And slowly, visit by visit, something shifted between them. The anger faded. The regret transformed into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding, acceptance. The recognition that 2 people could love each other and still destroy each other. And maybe the best thing they could do was honor what they'd been while accepting what they'd become. On the 62nd visit, Vincent kept count. Alara brought someone with her. A teenage boy, maybe 17, with the same hollow look Vincent remembered from his own childhood. "This is Marcus," Alara said through the glass partition. "He reminds me of you. Angry, smart, about to make choices that'll ruin his life." I told him about the trust fund, about how someone who'd made terrible choices decided to do one good thing before it was too late. He wanted to meet the person who funded his scholarship. Vincent looked at Marcus, saw himself staring back. "You think I'm some kind of hero?" Vincent asked the kid. "I'm a convicted murderer, serving life. I've got 17 kills on my record. I destroyed families, hurt people. Spent 20 years being the worst version of myself." Marcus shrugged. "Miss Montez said you also saved 200 kids from becoming you. Said you gave up everything to make sure we had chances you never did. That's gotta count for something." "It doesn't erase what I did," Vincent said. "Nah," Marcus agreed. "But maybe it balances it out a little. Makes the math less terrible." After Marcus left, Alara stayed. "You're making a difference," she said quietly. "Inside these walls. The warden told me you've helped a dozen inmates earn their GEDs. 3 of them are taking college courses now. That's not nothing, Vincent. It's not enough, Vincent replied. It's never enough, Ilara agreed. But it's something, and sometimes something is all we get. She pressed her hand against the glass. Vincent matched it with his own, separated by bulletproof barrier and 2 decades of choices. I've been thinking, Ilara said, about that promise you made on the rooftop, about marrying me when you got rich. Vincent's chest tightened. Ilara, let me finish, she interrupted. You kept that promise in the worst way possible. But you also kept a better one. You chose to save people instead of yourself. So here's my counteroffer. When you get out— I'm never getting out, Vincent said flatly. When you get out? Ilara repeated firmly. And you will eventually, because I'm working on it. I have lawyers looking at your case, and I'm not giving up when you get out. We're going to have dinner. Just dinner. Not marriage, not some grand reunion. Just 2 people who loved each other a long time ago, trying to figure out if there's anything left worth building on. Vincent felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. That could be 30 years from now. 40. I'm not young, Ilara. By the time I get out, if I get out, we'll be old. She smiled. Good. I always wondered what you'd look like with gray hair. Why? Vincent asked. The question encompassed everything. Why visit? Why wait? Why care about a man who destroyed his own life and nearly destroyed hers? Because you kept the right promise, Ilara said simply. It took you 20 years and a prison sentence to figure out which promise mattered. But you figured it out, and I believe in second chances. It's kind of my whole thing. She stood to leave. Same time next month? I'll be here, Vincent said. He always said that. But this time it felt different. This time it felt like a promise worth keeping. 12 years after his arrest, something unexpected happened. Vincent Torino's case was overturned. Not because of the murders he'd confessed to those, and the confessions were legally sound, but because a young lawyer working with Ilara's nonprofit had found irregularities in the evidence collection. Enough to warrant a review, enough to raise questions. And once those questions were raised, things started unraveling. It turned out Anthony Castellano's perfect frame job had a flaw. He'd been too thorough. The evidence matched too perfectly. The confessions were too detailed for someone who wasn't actually at the crime scenes. And when the FBI started looking closer, really looking, they found traces of the real killer. DNA that didn't match Vincent's. Witnesses who'd been paid to stay quiet. A trail that led not to the ghost, but to Carlo Castellano. The FBI offered Vincent a deal. Testify against the Castellano family, and his sentence would be reduced to time served. He'd be free. Vincent took the deal. Not for freedom, but because bringing down the family that had threatened Ilara felt like closing a circle he'd opened 20 years ago. The trial took 6 months. Vincent testified to everything, the forced confession, the threats against Ilara and the kids, the entire setup. Carlo Castellano got life without parole. Anthony Castellano got 25 years. The empire they'd built crumbled. And on a Tuesday in March, Vincent Torino walked out of prison, a free man. He was 48 years old, gray at the temples, lines on his face from 12 years of hard living, but alive, free, and completely terrified of what came next. Ilara was waiting outside the gates. She looked older, too, 51, silver streaks in her hair, laugh lines around her eyes, but still beautiful, still her. Hey, she said. Hey, Vincent replied. Ready for that dinner? They went to a diner 3 blocks from her apartment, the same diner where they'd eaten after his first visit to her apartment all those years ago. They ordered sandwiches, turkey, and cheese, just like the first one she'd given him when they were kids. So, Ilara said, what now? Vincent thought about it, about the empire he'd lost, the years he'd spent in prison, the boy he'd been, and the man he'd become. I don't know, he admitted. I don't have money, don't have power, don't have anything. except a criminal record and 12 years of mentoring experience. Ilara smiled. Sounds like you'd be perfect for my nonprofit. We need someone to run our mentorship program, someone who understands where these kids are coming from, someone who's made mistakes and learned from them. Interested? Vincent stared at her. You want me to work with kids? I want you to save them, Ilara corrected. The way I saved you with that first sandwich. The way you saved 200 of them with that trust fund. We could do it together this time. Actually, together. Not you from a prison cell and me from the outside. Together. Vincent felt tears prick his eyes. I don't deserve this. Any of this. Maybe not, Ilara agreed. But you're getting it anyway. That's what grace means. Getting what you don't deserve because someone decides you're worth the risk. She reached across the table and took his hand. So, Vincent Torino, poor boy who promised to marry me when he got rich. You got rich. You lost it all. You went to prison and you came out broke. But you know what? I think I'll take you anyway. Not because of who you were, but because of who you're still trying to become. Vincent squeezed her hand. That dinner offer still stand? Just dinner. See if there's anything worth building on? Oh, we're way past dinner, Ilara laughed. This is our 57th meal together if you count prison visits. I think we're already building. And maybe that was the real ending. Not a fairy tale where love conquers all and the poor boy gets the girl, but something more honest and harder one. Two broken people choosing to build something new from the wreckage of their old promises. Two people who'd loved and lost and destroyed and saved, finally understanding that the best promises aren't about being rich or powerful or perfect. The best promises are simple. Show up. Try again. Keep choosing each other. And maybe, if you're lucky, that's enough. Vincent and Ilara left the diner hand in hand, walking into an uncertain future with nothing but each other and a shared history of promises kept in the worst ways and the best. The ghost was dead. Vincent Torino was alive. And for the first time in 33 years, he had something more valuable than power or money. A second chance. And this time, he wasn't going to waste it. So there it is. The story of a boy who made a promise he couldn't keep, became a monster trying to keep it, and finally learned that the right promise was never about wealth or power. It was about choosing people over pride, about sacrifice over survival, about love that's willing to wait 12 years for someone to figure out how to come home. If this story moved you, drop a comment below. Tell me about promises you've made, the ones you kept, the ones you broke, the ones you're still trying to figure out. Because we're all Vincent and Ilara in some way. We've all made promises we didn't know how to keep. We've all chosen the wrong path and wondered if it's too late to choose differently. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Real, messy, honest stories about people who screw up and try again. About second chances that cost everything. About love that survives the worst versions of ourselves. And remember, it's never too late to make a new promise. One that matters. One that makes you better instead of just richer. One that brings you home. Because in the end, that's what we're all searching for. Not empires, not power, not even redemption. Just someone who sees us, really sees us, and says, "Welcome home. Let's try again." That's the promise worth keeping.